now.
Here we go. How you doing, everybody? Oop, why didn't I get a volume? Here we go. Take two. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the Science of Fantasy Football. Why the Science of Fantasy Football? Well, you get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're going to use the scientific method, and that just means we're going to use statistics in a much smarter way. And joining me as he does each and every week here on the Science of Fantasy Football, because he is the fantasy professor. He's a real professor. Retired now.
Retired.
It is Professor John Bush. And
Yep.
John, so many changes with free agency. We kind of know who's going to be where. And I'm not so sure that all of that knowledge is making me a smarter fantasy football player yet.
Yeah, the psychological side, it's clear the results show the more data you have, your accuracy doesn't go up, but your feeling that it's going up is going up, right? So you're feeling more confident about the same level. So you're tricking yourself, and I think a lot of that's going on right now. And I guess the more clicks you click, the smarter you think you are. And I don't think that's the case. Be scared the whole time and be uncertain and don't make the final decisions yet. Let it all come in. Get ready to change your opinion as needed. Don't lock in on your thinking now. Just start to peruse a little bit, take a little bite of the different foods on the trough, Dennis, but don't, just grab the whole thing right away. Let it come to you. Don't be jumping too quick into the fire, into the frying pan, Dennis.
One of the keys to success in fantasy football is the fact that you don't have to be perfect in your prognostications in order to win. You just have to beat consensus. And quite often, what we see in fantasy football are these hot free agents that have changed teams, usually become overpriced because the majority of people, the consensus out there is that they're going to have a really great season. And as we know from the past, at different positions, it's very hard for a player to really improve on what he's done. We, over on our sister podcast, the Data Lab, we dove into wide receiver data.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that we saw was pretty evident that there is a definite stair step to the data.
Yes.
If you and the data, the statistical tests say that it's significant if you finish in one group versus the other. And when I look at the career MVP arcs at wide receiver, for instance, there are not a lot of free agent wide receivers who suddenly became drastically better than what they performed in the past at MVP. So a guy like Romeo Doubs heading to New England is going to be a hot guy in drafts this year.
Right.
But my MVP data shows that if you haven't hit 60, you haven't hit 60 or more in MVP by year 3, you're less likely to hit that number. You're less likely to hit 80 or higher the rest of your career. There are a few players who have done it, but for the most part, the players that failed to hit 60 in my MVP, and just to give you a reference, 60 is WR31-ish level.
Mhm.
So we're not talking a very high bar to clear.
Mhm.
And 80 or higher is WR22 or better. So I'm not asking for a guy to do that much before he clears another bar that really is WR2 level.
Right.
Now, in Dobbs's case, it's going to all come down to ADP. Because if he is outside the top 40 in ADP, I'll take a shot at it. Because he's got the chance to lead his team in
What's his
targets.
ADP now today?
It was about 50 before he changed teams.
But after
So, yeah, it hasn't really, it's
moved.
come up a little bit, but I will look in about 2 weeks to see
Mhm.
where he is. And then about a month to see where he is.
Mhm.
And then, of course, we're not drafting until we get into the summer months.
Mhm.
So by the time I get to June, I'll know whether he is going to clear that bar or not. But his uncertainty is really, really high versus a guy like Chris Olave, who we know his range of outcomes is pretty small and all of them are pretty high.
Right.
So those are the kinds of guys that I would rather have. But I have to spend a higher draft pick right now to get Olave versus Dobbs. But Dobbs' upside is questionable. I just don't know where he could be because he has not cleared that bar of MVP 60. And if you haven't done that by year 4, the data shows that most of those guys don't do it in their career. So that's one guy that I'm looking at who I think will be a higher consensus. There were a lot of people in the fantasy football world that really liked him. With this move, I'm not sure yet. Versus a guy like Mike Evans, who's getting up there in age. But let's say Evans and Dobbs, let's say they end up being pretty similar in ADP.
Mhm.
When we start drafting this summer, I'd be leaning towards the old guy Evans because we know what he's been able to do in the past, and he's got an open path to leading his WR room in targets if he can stay healthy. But so many of these wide receivers that are signed as free agents, they never live up to the hype or the paycheck.
I think that's part of it is thinking about historical aspects that you have, and that it's hard to go against uh, tendencies like that. And I think the closer the ADP is to your value, the more scrutinizing you should be. If Dobbs drops to say 70, that's, oh, okay. I'm it's starting to get juicy here. I, you've got to include that value. And sometimes I think the luster seems brighter than its value, the player's value. And that's where I think the disconnect is. And people are throwing their beer cans through the TV about mid-season if they drafted him too high. And everybody's mad. So I think, you know, if a player is close to what you perceive as value, that's eh. You're looking for that extreme. And the further you go in the draft, the more you need some discount for me. You know, your fifth, sixth wide receivers, you better be really getting some upside versus your first one or two. You're wanting safety. And you've preached that, Dennis, throughout and you're better than zero, that's all part of it. It's built in that we're looking at running backs having that high floor ceiling and you're playing into that versus wide receivers. We can't play into both because you've got to kind of pick a position and kind of focus. And again, the draft, it depends on what's given to you. But the tendency you and I take or go to is running backs. We're looking for the extremes versus wide receivers. Why would we want to take Dobbs at his value if that's the best he could, be in his upside? That doesn't seem like a good strategy, and it's not. We would rather gamble on a running back that could ascend with injury or opportunity versus a wide receiver that has a track record that in year four, they hadn't done it yet. There's no back class, is what we would say in horse racing. So I'm looking elsewhere for a younger running back that hasn't established their form yet.
Yeah, and that's a great way to look at this because, again, I'm setting the bar pretty low. If a guy can't reach 60, if he hasn't been a top 30 wide receiver by year 4, the data shows that he's not going to be elevating himself in future years in a significant way. Maybe one good year. But even guys that have had that one good year, like a Jerry Jeudy, they had a better track record earlier on. They showed some form. Jeudy, for instance, hit a 92 his third year.
Right.
Dobbs has never been higher than 50 in MVP. That's a significant difference. And every year we see these guys change teams, get a lot of money, and we see them flame out. And we see it at all positions. I mean, look at how much money teams have wasted at the quarterback position before free agency this year. Before the new league year started,
Right.
2 of the top 5 quarterbacks in pay in their cap hit for 26 were released. That's a lot of dead cap money. So when I look at quarterbacks that are switching in free agency, I look at 2 different things. So you got Willis going to Miami, and everybody's excited about this because he had 3 decent games with Green Bay last year, right? So what did that mean as far as real performance in fantasy football? Well, it didn't really mean a great deal. I mean, he had 3 games and he hit his mark of where I'd expect him to be, mainly with his legs. So his MVP score in a 3-game set, which of course I don't look at anything under 6. Under 6 games, I treat it as if it never happened. He was a 200 in MVP. So you'd be like, oh, wow, that's exciting. Not if it's less than 6 games. If it's less than 6 games, my data suggests that it's just a random occurrence. It doesn't really mean anything. Once I get to 6 games or more, then I look and I'm like, okay, that guy is what he is. But here's a second problem that you have with quarterbacks is if you draft Malik Willis this year as either your QB1 or QB2 in a 1 QB league.
Right.
So there's 2 ways that he can disappoint you. One is he could just not be very good consistently, and he can be like a 60 or 70 MVP guy and not be somebody who's going to have a huge impact on your team because at quarterback, we know that 11 quarterbacks usually hit 80 or higher.
Mhm.
So we want a guy who hits 80 or higher as our quarterback. We'd prefer to have two of them. And then we could play matchups, and all of a sudden we're going from 85 to playing the better of the two, and maybe we're getting the equivalent of a 110 guy. So Malik Willis can disappoint you just based on the data, or he can disappoint you because he can't hold the starting job. And that's the big fear with some of these free agent quarterbacks,
Yeah.
is because they just don't have a track record with wins or losses, that we're really not sure. I mean, is Kyler Murray going to hold the job with Minnesota?
Right.
I mean, if we look at just Malik Willis, or we look at Kyler Murray's data, there's a lot of downside just to the data.
Right.
And then the further downside of they could be on the bench is a scary thing when you're looking at quarterbacks that you want to invest in for fantasy football.
So this is my comm data, Dennis, for the quarterbacks. And Willis is on the second page, way down.
Yes. Yes.
I'm thinking, why? What is it that's I'm pulling? There's nothing here that would, I'm not pulling him as my one, probably even as maybe a two. He's my three that
Yes.
right now by the data.
Yes. And Kyler Murray's on that same chart.
Same level. Yeah, I don't know where he's at, but he's to me at the same level. I'm not sure where he's at, but yeah, right here. I mean, I mean, this shows you where 80 is, and if you look, here's 80 here, and look at all the quarterbacks
Yeah.
that probably are going to finish above that mark. Dennis, there's about 12. It's like, why am I fishing down? I mean, why are you fishing down there when I can get? I mean, I know Drake May is pretty good, but I'm liking Lawrence this year. Purdy is intriguing. You know, Brissett, his range of outcomes is crazy. He could be the
Yes.
best or one of the worst.
And he
It's
could be on the
crazy.
bench. He
Yeah,
could
it
be
could
on
be
the
on the
bench.
bench, which is the worst. Yeah. So I'm probably fishing elsewhere for my two. I'm not, Willis is not in the one for me. I'm
No,
thinking a two, a
yeah.
backup or a streamer at best. And I have to wait for the schedules before would I take him or Murray? It probably would depend on the strength of schedule might be a tiebreaker.
Yeah, and we've had 4 significant free agent quarterback movements. We've had Willis to Miami, Tua
Hmm.
to Atlanta, where he'll compete with Penix. Whoever's healthy, week 1 will start.
Uh,
It's a possibility that only one will be healthy between the two.
right,
The Jets, Geno Smith and Kyler Murray. Those are the big 4 that have changed teams
right.
that we know of, and I would go fishing for any 4 of them, because I think there's values to be found
Hmm.
that are much more well defined than any of those 4 guys, because even in superflex leagues,
Hmm.
I'd be hard pressed to have those guys maybe as my 3. But boy, we saw with Tua in our best ball superflex tournament last year,
Yeah,
how much that hurt when he went to the bench. And
that killed us.
he's got an even better chance of going to the bench this year. We grabbed him cheap,
Yeah,
and he
we
was a
did.
good option. But you know, I'm looking at this quarterbacks changing teams, and none of them have any appeal to me at all. So we've already looked at the wide receivers.
Yep.
We know that traditionally the wide receivers do not elevate with the new team that, they don't play back to, they
In
don't
fact,
suddenly play
Grok,
back.
if you ask Grok the question, AI says there tend to be a little bit like what, half a target less on
Yeah.
average.
Yeah.
So it's at best they're running in place at best. The average says they're doing about what they did. So I don't know if you're thinking of anybody in particular, but I would look at their MVP of last year and thinking at best that's the range that I can expect. In other words, is there one that you're thinking, wow, the opportunity is so crazy, they're going to do much better than their MVP? Say 20% higher. I don't know
Yeah.
if you've looked at it like opportunity index that you're working on. Is there one that's really standing out to you?
The one that is intriguing to me at
Mhm,
wide receiver
mhm,
is a guy that has some back class.
mhm.
And, I already mentioned Evans. I'm not going to double up on that guy. The guy that intrigues me, depending on what they do at quarterback,
Right.
is Michael Pittman.
Yeah.
And he's going to be playing for Pittsburgh this year. It's going to be a different offense. He's only got DK Metcalf ahead of him.
Mhm,
So Pittman is intriguing because here's a guy entering his seventh season in the league. He's got 3 of those 6 seasons that he's played already, 75 and above
Right.
in MVP. And when I look at that, I'm hoping to roster guys who are going to finish with an 80 or higher in MVP. He had a 47 last year. Awful. Had a 25 the year before. Ugh. But the 3 years before that, he was 94, 75, 88. Years 2, 3, and 4, I would accept that on my roster.
Mhm,
And again, it'll depend on where his ADP is. But if he's going late,
mhm,
if he's a, WR 45 plus kind of guy,
mhm.
I might take a shot at him.
Is there an ADP MVP kind of bucket? Have you thought about that?
Yes, actually, I have, because what I look at is my top 22 wide receivers.
There you go.
They
Yes.
better be 80 and above in
Okay.
MVP.
Okay.
My top 30
Mhm.
wide receivers better be above 60.
Yeah.
And when I look at those guys, when I look at guys past
Mhm.
WR 30,
Right.
I'm just looking at what's their upside. If the stars all align, what's
Mhm.
their upside? With Pittman, I think his upside as an MVP is 75 or greater.
Mhm.
So
So a two-ish maybe.
two-ish. Yeah, he'd be his second best starter or a flex guy.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that as his upside. But his downside,
A four
his
or
down
five.
his downside's WR 50 level. So he's not even worth rostering.
Mhm.
So you look at those extremes and you're like, ugh, you know.
Right.
And that's
Right.
that's why I say I don't look at the wide receivers who are changing teams
Mhm.
as guys that I'm really building around in the draft, because when I look at the draft, when I apply my better than zero philosophy,
Right.
when we look at the safe players, we know who those are in the first 3 rounds. Okay.
Right.
Those are the guys with no red flags by them, or no more than 1 red flag in all of our data sets.
Right.
That only injury is the only downside for those guys. And you can't predict injuries.
No.
Like, that's not something that you can routinely do. And even a guy who gets hurt, I'll take 10 great games, 10 above median games, and figure out what to do the other 6 weeks. if a guy misses time regularly, like Chris Olave has had problems with concussion. So you put a little indicator by his name. Okay, this guy has had concussions in the past. Now he made it through last year perfectly healthy.
Yeah.
But even the years where he's missed 3 or 4 games,
Right.
he's been a 90 or above every single year on MVP. So he has been top 15 guy in MVP. Those are the kind of guys I'll bet on. I don't care about the injury risk because you can't predict it. But when I look at guys and I see what is the potential downside, what's the worst year that they could have without injury?
Right.
And what have they done in the last 5 years? When I look at a guy who's posted 1 or 2 seasons under 50 MVP,
Mhm.
that's a red flag that's waving. That's a gale warning.
So
you don't want those guys.
Dennis, while you were thinking, I asked Grok predicting injuries, and so they I'm trying to, there's apparently something on Amazon, Digital Athlete, an AI powered platform to predict injuries, video sensors. So uh, they're talking about workload and usage, injury history. So I don't know if uh, you appreciate tools like injury predictor. Let's see, dive into injury. Yeah, I'm just trying to, can't run symbols. You can give you a solid edge. So I'm not sure where the data looks like people are trying to do that, Dennis. They're saying 40% level, 56% detecting on synthetic data. Uh, hmm. They're saying 300 touches, age, decline post 27, prior injuries. But nobody, I don't know if they've done statistics or any of this. I'm not seeing that here, Dennis.
No, in my data has shown that guys who had above 310 touches, wide receiver or running backs who had over 310 touches, they decline in MVP. They go down. But as we've already seen at the running back position, a lot of running backs have their best year 1 anyway in
Yes.
MVP. So they're
Or
all
year
going,
two, there's
or
this
year
big
2.
upstep, but
Yeah.
after that, it doesn't really increase.
So what that tells me is everybody's declining to some level at the running back position. So that's why I've never really worried about that too heavily. Like, for instance, Bijan Robinson has had huge amount of work
Right.
his first couple of years. I'm not going to let that bother me because his worst MVP was as a rookie at 106. Then he was 159, 135. That's 2 back-to-back years that was as high as it could be an RB1 either year, okay, an MVP. And his worst year, the 106, is a solid RB10 season. So his outcomes have been varied between only RB1 and RB10. That's it. That's pretty damn good. And I'll bet on that versus Jamar Gibbs, for instance, had a 118 last season after a 141 his second year and a 107 his rookie year. So he's only had 1 year as good as Bijan Robinson's, best 2 years. So Bijan to me is a little better bet than Gibbs going into this year, their year 4. But I'm not going to let my injury concern at that position
Mhm.
get me for either one of those guys or for CMC for that regard. Now we know that running backs, I mean, this is his year 10 season.
He's crazy, Dennis. I don't think you can use him as the average tenure. He's
Oh,
not.
no, no.
He's an extreme.
He's had 1 year under I'm sorry. Yeah, 1 year under 120 after his rookie year. Rookie year was 106.
Right.
Then he went 173, 181, 200 in a very partial season, less than 5 games, so that doesn't count. 133 in 6 games,
Right.
or 6 to 8 games. Then a 135, 175 back-to-back seasons where he went back-to-back seasons missing a lot of time to back-to-back seasons not missing a single game. And then year 8 dropped to a 50 in a partial season, then back up to a 165.
Yeah, I think my data shows he's beating all of it. He's the extreme.
He's beating all of the odds, but there's
Yes.
no way I would take him in the top 5 picks of the draft. Because the data suggests that year 10 is not going to be better than what he's done. It's likely to have a decline. And the team is likely to start lowering the number of hits he takes during the regular season so they can have the best of Christian McCaffrey in time for the playoffs.
Yeah. So it's an artificial kind of, you can't predict the opportunity when you've got this situation. I mean, nobody's had a CMC in their 10th year.
No.
So we don't have a data points to look at.
No. And what we know is that in the past, year 10 has not been kind to running backs. So
did they cut his opportunities last year? Seemed like they
did. They did. And he was still as efficient as ever.
Yeah.
Like he still had an unbelievable year. So you notice I said, I'm not taking him in the first 5 picks.
Right.
I didn't say I wouldn't take him in the first round.
Right.
So there are about 6 or 7 players that if they're available, I'm taking them before Christian McCaffrey, and that might include Chris Olave.
If you take CMC as your first RB, are you going to rush back and double up on another RB just to cover anyway? In other words, are you dooming yourself to missing a flexibility? Have you done with that kind of locked in inflexibility? How does that play in your historical production, making money kind of thing? You see what I'm saying? You almost are locking yourself in. It's like if you took Mike Evans as your first WR, let's just say you did, you're almost locked in to take it as a one just right back because just given the concerns.
Yes, and that's actually a great strategy. And I know what my team. Here's the thing: better than zero is a suggestion. It's a roadmap. Okay.
Yes.
But there are different ways from getting to point A to point Z.
Yeah.
But if you take a Christian McCaffrey in the first, let's say I'm drafting 7th or 8th in the first round, all of my safe guys, and when I say safe, that's with the ultimate air quotes.
Right.
But the guys that I have, that they have a very low range of outcomes and they're all high. That's JSN, Puka, Sun God, Olave at wide receiver. It's probably Bijan Robinson, Ooh.
Gibbs
Hey,
worries me at his price.
Gibbs worries me at his price, but I'm probably taking him before CMC. So that's my 6 guys right there. And my other
But if
running
you take CMC
backs,
this year,
yes.
you're going
That
to have to
I
take another one, another
yeah.
RB
If
the
I take
second round.
I take CMC, I know I'm not getting an elite tight end. I already know this season that I'm not likely to overspend at quarterback.
Mhm.
I am flexible to overspending at tight end
Mhm.
because at tight end, while the variance can be crazy, as we've seen with
Yes.
your lollipops,
Yeah. Data.
that the range of outcomes at tight end is crazy.
Is
It's
seasonal crazy and
it's
weekly
season
crazy.
correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
So there are reasons to be a little scared of overpaying at tight end, but there's also the payoff for getting it right.
If you take CMC in the
I
tight
can't,
end
yeah,
premium, you're probably walking away from one of the top tight
absolutely,
ends.
absolutely,
Yeah.
because I cannot take, I cannot increase my tolerance for risk that early in a draft. Because if I take CMC,
Mhm.
I better be right with my second running back.
That's what I'm saying.
And I better be right
Yeah.
with my first wide receiver.
I'm just saying, does it lock you? Are there players that lock you in and you lose flexibility? In other words, if the draft gets funky on your second pick, are you locked in and you miss that opportunity to zig and zag when with a different pick you would be in a different position? It almost seems
Yes,
like you're locked in if you take
yes,
a CMC.
yes, I agree with that because here's the problem at running back is we are seeing an evolution at the position. We're seeing changes to how this position is being used. Case in point, last year, teams that are this year going into the 26th season with a player that had an MVP of 100 or greater
Right,
last year, that's 11 teams. Okay. That's
right.
11 of 32 teams.
Yeah. So it's a third.
So that's pretty scarce. Now, if you look at which guys had an MVP over 100 in the
Right,
last 2 years in a row,
right.
that drops you to 7.
I was about to say, yeah,
You got Bijan Robinson, Derrick Henry, Chase Brown,
yeah,
which is an interesting pick.
yeah.
Then you've got Gibbs, you got Josh Jacobs, you got Kyron Williams, who we already know might be threatened for carries with Blake Corum, and then you got Devon Achane with Miami. Those are the 7. Those are your 7 guys that have had an MVP of 100 or more 2 years in a row.
Right.
And as we know from looking at the running back data, if you've been over 100 2 years in a row, that likelihood of being over a third year
Yeah.
is pretty darn good versus somebody who's never made 80, for instance.
Right.
So, but that's 7 out of 32 teams that, and 2 of those, Miami and the Rams, and maybe even Detroit,
Yeah.
are 3 teams that definitely use some level of a split in the backfield. And then you got Baltimore with Derrick Henry
Yeah.
that might use more of a
Like a
split.
CMC, we're going to save Henry. We're
We're going
going,
to try to save him.
and
Now,
so how does, again, if you took Henry, are you in the same CMC? I think CMC is more extreme, but I believe Henry you're still kind of locking yourself in for that next pick right after them. And
If I,
I
but
haven't done the historical data, Dennis. How good am I at that pick, given I'm locking myself in, like the CMC? I haven't looked at that.
and the biggest difference between CMC and Derrick Henry is the cost of acquisition, because I might get Henry as late as the early third round, or
That
maybe even
sounds a lot more
mid third.
palatable than CMC in the end of the first round.
And I would rather have spent a first round pick on something with a little bit more of a refined upside
Right.
than, once I get to the third round, I've already started. I mean, we're talking 25 players, 24 players off the board already by the start of the third round,
Right.
30 players by the middle of the third round.
Right.
So if you look at the total number of players that are going to be over that elite,
Right.
we're talking 25 guys before you get to 25 guys before you get to quarterbacks. So I'm looking at all of my super elite guys are going to be off the board. And if I can get Derrick Henry, who has been over 100 2 years in a row, again, he's heading into year 11. What the hell is going to happen with him year 11? I have no idea. But I know that he's not likely to go up. It's, if anything, he'll tread water, or maybe he'll drop into a 90. Maybe 90 is his upside in MVP. Plus, you got to change a coach. So what is that going to do? These are all the factors that come into play. But you're right. If you select one of those old timers who the data suggests that down is the preferred option, like, yes, he could tread water, right? Could be same as the last couple of years. He ain't going up. Versus a second or third year guy
It could be ascending a little bit.
Who we know is, by age and experience, is more likely to be going up than down.
So when I'm thinking the calm, I'm thinking, oh, I'm getting another 2-3 weeks upside.
Yes.
Versus, oh, I'm getting the same.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's the big challenge. But you're right. Every pick you make in the draft changes what you're doing in the next round.
Right.
Some, it's positive, because if I can open my draft with a JSN or a Sun God or a Puka at wide receiver, I'm pretty set. I am very confident that I'm going to have a top 10 wide receiver whenever they're on the field in fantasy football. Now I can decide. I can go tight end real early and try to get a premium up that position. I can go running back, or I can grab my second wide receiver. There's no effect. It simplifies my draft. It doesn't complicate my draft.
If you get CMC, I think it's even further. I think you're going to have to grab another RB quicker, and I think you're locked in later to get the backups for CMC to cover your investment. So your flexibility. So how, and I don't know how to measure this yet, Dennis. I just envision, let's call draft flexibility as a metric. I don't think I've ever thought about it like this until now. It's just an epiphany. How do we measure that? Because it's almost like you're calling the next Three of your 20 picks, you're calling a backup for CMC right away, and maybe the top two backups for CMC late. So you've lost three potential flex points now that are almost spoken for.
Yeah,
Does
and
that make
that's
sense?
it
Yeah.
makes total sense. And you add to that the fact that, like, for instance, in Buffalo, if
Mhm.
James Cook goes down, I'm highly confident
Yeah.
that Ray Davis is the guy.
So again, you're if you took Cook, then yeah. So what do we yeah, how do we define that? I got to think about that. I got to write this down.
Yeah,
How do I
and
flick about this metric, this envisioning of the 20 picks? It's kind of like a dragon tail. Is it stiff and it doesn't move, or is it very whip-like? And which one wins you more money? I got to
yeah,
think about that.
and that's a good way to think about it, because I don't think there is an exact answer to that.
I bet game theory, I bet there are some people that could figure that out, Dennis. I'm
But
just
it's
not that mathematically. I'm gonna have to think about that.
but this is the similarity. Our guy Joe Carlton, that we love on the Aces Up podcast on
Yeah,
Sports Affiliation, he talks so much about fantasy football and poker
yeah,
being very similar. And in poker theory, every card that comes up in the middle
yeah.
changes the calculation of what's in your hand.
Right.
And I think you're right. In when you make certain moves in
So should
fantasy football
we
drafts,
characterize those moves so we kind of know, okay, if I'm going down this path, I'm blocking myself in. I'm
I'm
just
limiting.
wondering.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
limiting your options.
Yeah, I'm wondering which one is better or not. I'm not saying limited options on good picks is bad.
No,
I don't know that. I don't
no,
know the success.
but it is changing the trajectory of your draft. It definitely is.
Flexibility metric. Yeah.
Anytime you pick a guy who has more inherent risk for whatever reason,
Yeah.
you are now limiting
Yeah.
where you're going. And it happens at every position. If I take a quarterback who has, you know, more injury upside because he's heavy run,
Mhm.
I'm more tending to take a safer pocket quarterback
Yeah.
with that second pick at
Yeah.
quarterback. I'm not likely to take two running quarterbacks. I don't want to have, you know, Jaden Daniels and come back with a Jackson Dart, for instance, because both of those guys play like their pants are on fire,
Right.
and you want to have a little bit more of a certainty that one of your guys is going to be still there, which, again, Brock Purdy does some running at times and that, but he doesn't do it every week.
Right.
And so your chances of getting a Brock Purdy or a Jared Goff or a Patrick Mahomes hurt again is a little bit less than a guy like Jackson Dart, who's got a concussion history, like Jaden Daniels, who's got an injury history. You look at those guys and the way they play, and it opens them up to more hits, and more hits is not good in
No.
in the NFL, whether it's sacks or whether it's scrambling out of the pocket. So I tend to take, and again, doesn't mean I won't. If Jaden Daniels and Jackson Dart both fall to me in a good spots,
Mm-hmm.
and I can get one nice and cheap, and I get the other guy cheaper than his ADP is right now,
Mm-hmm.
I might roll the dice. But when you make that pick, you know which route you're going down. It sort of defines it. Versus if I take a Bijan Robinson, I'm not really it's not changing the trajectory of my draft. I can come back with another running back, or I can come back with a wide receiver. I can overspend at tight end.
Right.
It really hasn't changed my opinion on the draft at all. But if I take a CMC, or if I come back in the second round or third round and take a Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry,
Right.
the uncertainty of decline due to age, in other words, the elongated lollipop formation, an elongated lollipop formation changes the trajectory of the rest of your draft. Just like if I overspend and I take Brock Bowers or Trey McBride late first or early second, now it's changed how I have to attack that draft. Now, the good thing is, if I've got a couple, let's say I've got 3 or 4 running backs, 3 or 4 wide receivers that I feel pretty confident that I can get late in drafts, 6th round later, that have the upside to be a top 15 guy, a Chris Olave, for instance. Now when I set up my draft, I mark on those rounds where I got to start thinking about getting those key players. And if I'm weak at wide receiver, by round 5, I know, okay, I'm a little better at running back. I got my premium tight end. I only have 1 wide receiver through 5 rounds. Now I get to round 6 and beyond, I'm looking at those value plays because I need more depth at that position. Every move you make in a draft does change your outlook and position scarcity. The fact that only 7 running backs have 2 years in a row of 100 plus. Whew, that's lean.
It is lean.
That's lean for the upper half of the guys. And that's kind of the strategy, or that's kind of my attack strategy. And part of what I'm doing when I put my opportunity index together is I'm looking at how many of those guys have a track record at wide receiver, tight end, running back. Quarterbacks I treat completely different than anything else. But knowing where I am in opportunity at any given point in the draft, I think is key, because I want to know, okay, I'm already in round 8, round 9 through 15, where's the value? That's where your patterns for ADP are important, because it tells me where everybody else is going to go shopping. And if that data suggests that everybody's shopping in running backs in round 8, and I need running backs in round 8, I'm in trouble. Versus if I'm going the opposite position, I'm probably sitting okay. But I don't know until I get, when I break down the draft and we look at ADP, I'll have my 3 to 5 guys at each position that I'm looking at as values. In other words, I'm not saying, oh, I'm just looking at player A.
Right.
I'm looking at a pool of 3 to 5 guys that I like here in this part of the draft. And that kind of tells me where the value, where the upside value guys are living. And that might determine whether I overspend for the premium running backs or the premium wide receivers early. Remember, when we broke down the data at the beginning of the year, there was a bigger gap from WR top 4 to WR 5 than there was at the running back position. So the super premium wide receivers, they number 4. There's 4 of them. there are, after the first two running backs, then I think the next group of running backs is a little deeper. They all have their faults, but there are guys that I like better than others. But Chase Brown with Cincinnati is probably going to be another guy who's going to end up, it's going to be another year that I'll probably end up with more Chase Brown on my teams than a lot of other running backs. I'll probably end up with a lot more James Cook this year than other guys, because they're going at a point in the draft where even if they just barely eke out a season that's maybe 20%, if they eke out the worst season that they've had in the last two, there's still a value at their point in the draft. Those are the guys that I'll probably be shopping for a lot, but very interesting. I like that strategy, Professor, and that idea of what if I do this, what is this going to do to my strategy moving forward? And I think some players, I think you're right, some players move that needle and restrict what you can do with your next pick more than others.
Yes.
Well, head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. I will have my first look at opportunity index coming very soon. I'm about 10 teams in. Need to finish the other 22 before I can let you know where we're sitting at the running back position. We'll look at running back first, but I do like this idea, Professor, of looking on the team level of where to go shopping at various positions. Head over to the sportsaffiliation.com. Check out our sister podcast, The Data Lab, where we really got in depth with that wide receiver data using the professor's comm data. And I got to tell you, folks, this lollipop approach of looking at the best and worst based on age first of what we can expect with players, I think is going to be a big hit for us in drafts this year. So you want to check that out at the sportsaffiliation.com. Oh, while you're over there, like and subscribe to their YouTube page. You do not want to miss a single show. So much talent over there. And I love that Aces Up podcast with Mr. Joe Carlton quite a bit. And head on back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.